Welcome to The Human Side of Money, a show dedicated to equipping financial advisors with the skill set required to work with emotional human beings on the emotionally charged topic of money. You'll get practical tips and insights on applying behavioral finance into your practice from conversations with fellow advisors, industry consultants, and experts in the fields of behavior, psychology, communication, and more. Each episode is designed to help you enhance client outcomes and forever change the trajectory of your advisory business. Now here's your host, Brendan Frazier.
Emily Rassam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I think we have to start with the story about how you got here, because there's a lesson in it that I think will be helpful and valuable for anybody and everybody that's listening, no matter where they're at in their life or their career. So about a week ago on LinkedIn, you mentioned that when at Future Proof, Samantha Russell's on stage, the well-known, highly regarded Samantha Russell, and mentioned how she'd been pitching herself to be a guest on a podcast. Do you remember which podcast it was, by the way?
Yeah, I think it was Josh Brown's podcast.
Okay. So she pitched herself there. And then so you talk about, hey, that motivated me. This creates good opportunities if you can put yourself out there. And said, hey, freshly motivated, I just pitched myself as a speaker for a conference, a webinar topic, an email to pitch to a podcast. At which point I thought to myself, wait a minute, I just received an email from Emily about coming on the podcast. Now, here's the thing, though. This is was it serendipitous? Possibly, maybe. You've also been on my list of top people to have on as soon as possible. So it was a great, it wasn't just completely random. But I'm just curious, was that what was the lesson there? Was it, or when you were listening to Samantha, was it like, hey, I need to put myself out there and opportunities, and it'll pay off. Like if I can put myself out there, I shouldn't be shy. Things will happen. Good things will happen if I put myself out there.
Yeah. I also think that we just get very busy with client work. And, if you just live in your email or live in your tasks, you're going to just stay busy. And I think part of that is reminding myself what some of my goals were for this year. And one of them was to have this conversation with you. So it was a reminder that, yes, even Samantha Russell still pitches herself. But also, I need to work on where do I want to be? So who do I want to be talking to? What conversations do I want to have? What stages do I want to be on next year? And so I blocked off some time, had that revelation at Future Proof conference, went back, blocked off a morning, and then said, where do I really want to be next year? So, of course, I thought to email you because we've had some great conversations before, and I'd love to get on the podcast. And I'm a big fan.
Yeah. That's a great point, a great reminder and lesson of it's so easy to be mired in the day-to-day, just going through your routine, going through your rhythm. You're doing great work for clients. Or it could be even outside of work. It could just be like your normal routines of life. And so we get on autopilot, but we don't oftentimes do a good enough job of stepping back and going, hey, what's the bigger picture here? Like, what are the things? How do I want to make sure that I'm intentionally doing things, not just like not on reactive mode during the day, right? But just stepping back to think about bigger picture. What are some of the things I want to do? What do I need to do to get there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. There's a question as well on your LinkedIn profile that I saw that I thought it'd be kind of fun to see what sort of answers you've gotten to it. So, and I'm a little bit biased because it's a question that I like a lot. You say, there's a question on there that says, shoot you a DM with the answer to this question. So I'm also interested to know, has anybody actually DM'd you? Because it's in your about section. I think it's a great idea to have this question there and give them a call to action to DM you. But I imagine if no one's DM'd you, you've probably asked this question in person or gotten answers to it before. If tomorrow you had unlimited funds in your bank account, what is one of the first items you would love to check off your bucket list?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think most people will go to travel as their
answer. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Does anybody say anything other than paying off debt, buying a new car or travel? Because those are like the most common responses I feel like you get from that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that more people want to say car because I know that people have that dream car in their heads, but they feel that they shouldn't. So I think
that's right.
I think travel is the right type of answer to respond to. I've had a few responses to that question, but most people don't really read that big about section.
What's your answer? If I asked you if you had unlimited funds, what would you check off? What would you do with it?
Yeah, I think that immediately, and this is part of my own money scripts, but I think I would pay off the debt of everybody I know. If I had unlimited funds, I think giving people financial security and financial peace so that they can then use their money intentionally towards things like travel. I think that would be top of my list. And then getting everybody together that I love on one amazing vacation together.
Where would you go? By the way, you couldn't avoid the travel answer, even though everybody else says it. It's like it still came back to, and then we would all travel together.
Yeah. I think that is on everybody's mind. I mean, it's the first question I ask people in a goals and values meeting. It's the first thing I typically talk about with clients because it starts that feel good. People like reflecting back on good travel experiences that they've had, or it's easier to dream about where they might go. So my brain always goes to the countryside of Italy. I'm all about going to Tuscany. I think bringing everybody to some big Italian villa with olive trees and a lot of wine and all of those things, I think would be a very magical experience to take people on.
So you said that it's the first question you ask in which meeting?
And we have a goals and values meeting as part of our onboarding process.
Okay. And the question is the exact one that we were asking, which is if you had unlimited funds in your bank account, what's the first thing you would check off your bucket list? Is that the question?
Yeah. We more specifically ask about if they had $50 million in their bank account. No one knew it was there. Taxes already paid. What would you do with that? I think that sometimes it's a little bit easier for people to spend money that's not theirs in their current account. So it's a little bit easier to maybe think about spending money if it maybe they won the lottery or it was given to them. It was a surprise inheritance or dropped into their bank account. Sometimes we dream a little bit better if that money, that dollar amount is a large enough number where they feel that they could really splurge.
Yeah, it takes off the money constraint, right? Where it's really hard to break out of this mindset of I have enough money to do anything that I could possibly do, right? It's really hard to get there, and fair enough, it's not really a reality for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I know that I've heard people say in the past that they get a little leery of or nervous about asking that question for a variety of reasons. Part of which being, well, that's not actually ever going to happen. So like if I tell them that they have $50 million, am I like getting them set up to tell me something that's not even going to be possible or doable? Was that a concern? Has that happened? Or what would you say to somebody that's in that frame of mind?
Yeah, I think it's the opposite, because I think that you learn that, these things that people consider these big, outlandish dream goals are actually maybe attainable. So I think that people's goals tend to be more reasonable than they might expect. So it's nice to hear what those are. And then I love to surprise and delight clients by peppering those into their financial plan. So I get a lot of cool ideas because I kind of dig and dig and dig. Okay, and what else? And what else would you do with it? And what else would you do with it? And find those little pieces, because sometimes it's a very achievable goal. And I like to plug those into the financial plan to say, yes, I was listening to your answer here. And now I've added this into a possibility in your financial plan that maybe wasn't a tier one goal for you initially. This was just some kind of offhanded comment or something that felt out of reach for you that now we're going to make in reach.
Okay. So let's take the answer that you gave me. Right. So I said, what would you do? And the first thing that came to mind that you said is that you would pay off everybody's debt. Was it friends? Was it family?
Yeah. Friends and family pay off their debt.
Okay. All right. Am I considered a friend? I think that's the first thing that's running through my mind. If not, how do I get in the friend circle for when you get your 50 million? But okay. You said you'd pay off the debt of friends and family. So I hear that and I go, that's good. I don't know that that's actually going to be possible. So let's say that you're in a meeting with yourself and you get that response. What are you thinking and what are you going to do with that? Like I'm guessing that's probably not going to show up as is on a financial plan at some point. So what would you do with it if that was the response that you got?
Yeah. And what's funny is if somebody gave me that response, I would just say, oh, okay. Because sometimes when people actually have money, and if they're more a money avoidant type of money script, one of those kind of aspects of somebody who's really high on that scale is the desire to give away money. And I think that, that there's something in somebody's background that kind of makes them want to give away money if they have it. I have that. And so I think that I kind of listen for that too and try to see how that shows up. So what that might mean is that a meaningful way for somebody to maybe spend their money is to do some gifting. So do some giving. And so that might mean, who are some people that you would love to surprise and delight or bring joy to or treat in some way? what are some little things that we can do? So for me, I think about, I have a twin sister and we were raised where everything's equal, right? She gets this, I get this. And so as, my career has grown, my income has grown, I wanted to kind of bring her along with me, right? So I'll help support some travel experiences or do things for her kids. And so there's that kind of element that lives in me, but maybe it's not practical for me to maybe pay off all of her debt or pay off the debt of all my friends and family, but that might look like setting a goal to spend a little bit more on travel so I can bring her and her family along, or to do some little surprise and delight gifts for her. That would be maybe how that could show up in my particular case or a client. I would try to dig for what those responses could be.
Interesting. So if I'm hearing you right, it's kind of like you say you want to pay off the debts, we'll call it, for the people that you know. There's a lot of things that could be underlying that. Like you said, it could be a money script of money avoidance. That may be one thing that you've got your ear tuned to, but you're also just trying to get at like, hey, what is the desire or the motivation behind that, right? So like, why would you like to help pay off the debts of the people that you know? It's like, well, I'd like for them to be able to do more, feel more free. I'd like for them to be able to, whatever it might be. And so then once you know that, then you can keep asking these questions. Like you said, you're not telling them what to do, by the way. You're asking, kind of guiding them. And then eventually they realize like, oh, I guess maybe I don't have to pay off my friend or my sister's debt. But one way that I can help in the similar vein is to pay for part of their trip to come on this vacation with us, right? So it's like you're not paying off debt, but you're giving money that still helps accomplish the same thing. If I'm explaining that, it makes sense in my head. I'm trying to make the dots connect out loud, but it's still a way to give back to help them, whether you're paying off their debts or you're helping them come on the family vacation that maybe they wouldn't, not that they couldn't, but maybe they wouldn't otherwise. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Because you think about, what does somebody do if they've paid off all of their debt? Well, now they can, give their kids different experiences or pay for certain things. And so maybe it's just getting to that point. What does that look like? So
yeah, what would paying off the debt allow them to do?
Yeah.
Okay, it allows them to do this. Okay, well, what if you could help them do that because you can't pay down their debt? Okay, the other aspect of it that you mentioned was, in your response, was this going on a trip to Italy, to Tuscany. You said that in your conversations with clients, you'd like to pepper in these things that they say into the financial plan. So if I was you, which I mean, that's not even fair, right? Those are some big shoes to fill. But let's just hypothetically say, if I'm you and we're in a meeting and you're the client and you say that, in your mind, are you sort of jotting that down, taking a mental note and saying, okay, whenever I deliver the plan, I'm definitely going to be including this trip to Italy at some point in the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So we take down all of their bucket list trip ideas, all of these purchases. And I explain to clients too, when I'm taking their goals in of, tell me kind of what your baseline travel and goals look like, but then what if you had extra? So what if you felt very secure? What if you had surplus funds? What if this money dropped in your lap? What would that next level look like for you? So I will go in and actually put those specifics in the plan as different tiles we can turn on and off. So we might have their normal travel budget, but we might have their enhanced travel budget. And I will put that in there. And a really important part about my process is finding the right emoji to put in there, because you can add an emoji in front of any travel. So for Italy, I'm going to probably pick the pasta that's kind of coming off the plate. But I'm going to pick some little emoji. And what I have found in our financial planning software is the maximum number of tiles under the goal section is 50. So I will listen for every little thing, and I might put it in as an unfunded goal, but I treat that as a bucket list. So I might have all of these different trips or travel ideas down there so that I know when we're talking to clients about trips that they want to take or experiences they want to have. And it's not just travel, it's putting in hobby budget. Yeah. It's putting in, that guy's golf trip that you want to take, or a vehicle purchase, or gifting that they want to do if they felt secure. And so we're going to add all of these different tiles with the little emojis, of course, and we're going to then decide together what can we turn on in the plan that might be extra or an enhancement to what they do. And so I build the baseline plan, and then I like to just wave that magic wand. And I love to add those little pieces into the plan that are personal to them using their words and listening for what those priorities might be. So if they could do more, what would that look like? And then I just pick some tiles to kind of pull up into their main plan and show them back what some of those goals might have been.
Their words, your emojis, but carefully selected emojis.
A very important part of the process.
Yeah. What do you have a favorite emoji that you've ever picked?
Ooh. I think the one that I use the most, so if you looked at my screen, it's the little eyeballs, because anytime in a financial plan I want to check some data or ask a question, I've got the 2 little eyeballs. But I love, there's a smiley face that I like, and I'll text it to you later.
Is the eyeballs the one with like the big eyes where you're looking at it like, wait a minute?
Yeah, it's just 2 eyeballs.
Yeah, the 2 eyeballs. Yeah. Okay,
that's to tell me. So I have little alerts or little alarms or little eyeballs on the plan that just reminds me of kind of where to potentially ask questions. So emojis are part of the process, not just in the goal setting.
So this tile approach, what software is it?
We're in Right Capital.
Right Capital. Okay. So on these tiles, I mean, you can do this with any software. You can do it on your own. There's a bunch of ways to do it. But we'll just use your example. It's sort of like these tiles, or I mean, I guess they represent goals, right? Essentially, it's basically a place to store all of your possibilities, all of your visions and goals. So not necessarily just, hey, here are the things that I want to do, that I can do, and that we're working towards. Those will be on there as well, right? So you may have like, take a trip next year, fund our kids' education, max out our 401k. You may have like those goals on there, but you're also using it as sort of a storage place or a repository that stores all of their possibilities, all the things that they want to do, so that it doesn't fall off the radar, so that you don't sit there and spend the time thinking about it going, hey, what would you like to do if you had unlimited funds? And I come up with this idea of like, oh yeah, you know what? I'd want to go on that guy's trip. Right. And then 6 months later, life's busy, things happen. I've been exposed to other things. Like I may not be thinking about that as much, but this is a place where you can put it so that we can resurface it so that it doesn't disappear, essentially.
Yeah. And it's a way to remind them of what those particular goals are, or, when you have a surplus come in. So let's say I'll work with a lot of clients that are in town that have events like IPO events or stock grants, or surplus money comes in at different points, or any profession, you can get a bonus, right? So it also helps to say, well, what were those goals that I set with more of that rational brain, that slow thinking brain? What were some of the things that I maybe thought about? It also helps to remind people of what some of those potential goals might have been, or where we could potentially place some of that money towards experiences that they've already previously identified.
It allows you to be more intentional with your money, right? So like you said, if you do get a surprise amount of money, you get a windfall, you have an event where you get a lot of money, you get a bonus, whatever it might be. Instead of just getting it and being excited and seeing all that money and going, I'm going to go out and buy the new car because my friend just bought the Tesla and he was showing it to me. I don't know why I'm picking on Tesla, and we're picking on cars too, but whatever. Or instead of going and buying the car that my friend just showed me because I think it's awesome, I can pause and go, wait, hang on. These are all the other things that I wanted to do with my money. And maybe you do end up buying the car, right? Maybe that is what you want to use it on. But instead of just doing it like reactively, it forces a little bit of intention.
Yeah.
Is what it sounds like.
Back into your own goals instead of that mimetic kind of desire of what did my neighbor just do? And I think the other thing that's really interesting about it, I try to do everything for myself, what I do for clients as well. When I went in there and said, what are the travel experiences I want to have with my kids while they're under my roof? And I started to build out these tiles and put timeline to it to say, these are the annual vacations I want to take. You realize how little time there is. So when clients start to tell me at retirement, they want to take a major vacation every 3 years, and you plot those out, you're like, we're 94 at the end of this last trip. So maybe we tighten this timeline a little bit too. So it's kind of an interesting way to maybe visualize what all of those trips might be, because there's, life can be short. And so being able to also see how many goals might fit into that timeline, I think it's also useful for that.
Do you show the clients all of these goals, not just the ones that you're pursuing in the plan, but like, do you go back and revisit them on an ongoing basis? Like, how do you, because I think we all, well, not all, but like most of us probably know how to pick the goals that are prioritize, the ones that we're working towards, saving towards, trying to hit. I think we all probably do a good job of pointing out those and highlighting where we're at on those. I'm just trying to think through, how do you utilize or show the client their eventual goals or their possibilities or the things that they've talked about in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple places we do that. So on the first page of Right Capital, you can add a blank white note. And so we'll pull in. So previously we were doing a statement of financial purpose, and more recently we started working with the Know Me software. So we have some responses that come out of Know Me that we are copying and pasting to the very first page of their financial plan on the dashboard when they first log in. So it will repeat back to them their answers to some of the questions in Know Me. It'll repeat back some of their values. Clients who haven't been through Know Me yet, it's their statement of financial purpose and then their top 5 values from that exercise. So I will also just grab things that are more meaningful. So if they've been through the kinder process, we'll take one of their really great answers to one of their questions, or maybe something they've shared with me in a meeting. So the first thing they see when they log online are their own words. And then when we get into the goal tiles section, I'm going to show them all of the goals, and I have them arranged by the timeline. So these are all the things you've shared with me that might come up in the next 18 months. And then these are some of the later goals, and we check those every meeting. So we're going to ask, what's different? What's new? Are you planning any home improvement projects? How's your vehicle running? Do you need to replace that at some point soon? How are you thinking about your education goals for your kids and where that priority comes in? So it's a way to just check in, because the rest of the plan isn't accurate if we're very wrong about those big outflows that might come up along the way. If I didn't plug in the new roof that you need on your house or the new car that you're going to go get, then the tax plan is wrong and the financial projection is wrong. So that part is really important to get right. And we check it every meeting.
So this first page that you have on that when they log in, you said, it was a statement of financial purpose. Now it pulls in some things that you've learned from Know Me. Mm-hmm. What is it like? If I this would be great if, this is on video, we could pull it up, but like for those that are listening, can you give us an idea of like what exactly is on there? I know you said it's their words. I guess I'm just wondering, like, is it their words explaining like why money's important to them, and then why have that there at the beginning?
Yeah. So from the statement of financial purpose, for those of you who haven't had that type of exercise with their clients, the way we use it is we had a jot form that we've created that lists out a lot of possible values that they might have. And so they're looking at this big list of 50 different possible values. And we ask them to check off and select ones that resonate with them. It could be they could select 20 of them, however many that they want. Then we ask them to pick the top 5 that resonate with them. And then the next step is to put them in order. So they will list their top 5 goals in order. And that's one thing I will grab, because they've done it on a jot form. They've submitted something to me that I can then copy and then put into the text of their financial plan. So then I know, or anyone on my team that's logging in and looking at their plan knows what those top 5 goals are to them. And then one of the questions below that is for them to craft their statement of financial purpose. So how are they going to bring these values to life in their financial plan? And so the purpose of money in my life is to, and they're going to provide some response to that. I just copy that text and put that in their financial plan, so that the first thing that they're looking at is their 5 values, and the purpose of money in my life is to. And the 3 ways I'm going to bring that to life are, and they're going to give their 3 responses to that. And then that text is on the front page of their plan. So it helps remind me what's important to them, helps remind them. And that's another thing that I ask them when we join the meeting. Has anything changed? Would you revise any of this? Because it's an editable field. So is there anything different that you would like to adjust? Because especially clients I've had for a long time, their responses change over time. Their goals change over their time. Their values change over time. And if we're not checking back in, we're going to have some stale information out there that doesn't feel like them anymore.
How do you weave together the values and then the goals, right? Because it sounds like you kind of get reminded of your values and your statement of financial purpose and how 3 things you're going to do to bring it to life. And then you see your goals. Do those 2 things, is it like a natural transition, a natural thing that weaves together as a part of the conversation, or are those separate in some kind of way?
Yeah. So typically they're separate places in the plan, but I back into it to say, this makes sense because you shared this with me. And so I like to sometimes draw those lines between what they've shared with me in a more values-driven conversation and then where that shows up in their goals. So it's just kind of sometimes connecting those dots for them. Oh, this makes sense to me because you shared this with me previously.
Can you think of an example just for somebody that's sitting here listening, trying to think about how that plays out? And then at the same time, I would imagine that there are also times where you have the values, you go through that, and then you get to the goals and the tiles, and then they have something that they're working towards where it may be out of alignment, right? Where you're going, hang on, is that in alignment? So can you give an example, I guess, of how the value plays into the goal? And then do you ever run into this contrast or this clash of, hey, this value doesn't align, or this goal doesn't align with what you said is important to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I can think of an example from a meeting a couple of weeks ago where a client had shared that the thing that was most important to them was making memories with their family. And so when we went and looked at the goals section, one of the goals that is kind of an offhanded comment from an earlier meeting, from a discovery meeting with them, how they said that they'd love to go to every single baseball stadium in the country with their son. And so I brought that goal in and I said, this is something that you shared with me in a previous meeting. I hope it's okay if I added this here to your plan. It reflects back on that value that you shared with me in your statement of financial purpose, where allocating and spending time with your kids while they're in your house is important to you. And so sometimes then where we get connected is there's only so much cash flow, right? So when we're allocating money towards a particular goal, how much we spend on our new vehicle or home renovations or when we want to retire influences how many of those other goals we get to accomplish. So when we move through that process, it's then understanding, well, how important is it to you to retire at 62 years old? And, how important is it to you to drive a brand new vehicle every 4 years? And bringing back in, these were some of the values that you shared with me. How would you like to balance those in your plan, and which goals do you want me to bring in? So sometimes it's just to kind of bring all of those pieces together because everything's interconnected.
Yeah, because you're ultimately, at the end of the day, you're helping them evaluate a trade-off, right? We don't have we can't do we don't have the resources to do all of these things. That's why we have these tiles that are here that we're going to work towards. Mm-hmm. We don't have the resources to do it all. Although at the beginning you did say that I had an unlimited amount of funds in my bank account, which at that point I would have the resources to do it all. But in reality, we don't. And so you're helping guide them through these conversations around navigating trade-offs in terms of where do we best allocate our money, right? And then seeing it through the lens of like your values and the things that are important to you, help you make that trade-off, right? And then also it's a great example. You can just kind of, you highlight for them, you point out and say, hey, how important is it to retire at 62 versus getting this new car? Because the decisions today will impact tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe most importantly, I would imagine, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit, but I doubt that you tell them what to do, but you're more or less, you're sort of like showing them, giving them this information so they can make the decision themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I never tell a client no, right? So I'm typically saying, like, if I told you today I wanted to retire today, the answer isn't no. It's you can retire today if you can live on X, right? Like you can live on this amount of money, you can retire. Well, I don't want to live on that amount of money, right? So I'm going to keep working. So the answers aren't typically no. It's just, this is the impact. And let me show you how that plays out. So here's the difference in your plan if we add or subtract some of these goals or make those changes. And so that type of conversation, I just had a conversation with a client who wants to build this amazing pool in their backyard with a built-in grill and just fantastic pool, more than you would expect to spend on a pool. And you're paying with that with years of your life, because the trade-off is that we bump up the retirement age. And there's other trade-offs you could potentially make. But, the values I knew were to keep vacation goals the same. So I knew that about them and I confirmed that with them. And they like to spend money on vehicles. So keeping that the same, but the one bigger lever to potentially pull is working longer to make that happen. And you can play with those variables once you know how important each area is. So if it's really important to fund education, or if it's very important to, go on a nice trip every single year, then what are the other levers I can play with? And just having that conversation out loud with the client and showing that in the financial plan allows them to make some of those decisions.
Do you ever worry that you're going to have a client that's in that scenario, they're sitting there looking at it going, we want the pool. We may have to make a trade-off. May have to sacrifice the car, may have to sacrifice the kid's education. But then there's the like retirement thing. And that's also like, maybe 10, 15, 20, even 5 years. It's in the future. Do you ever worry that one just naturally gets put on the back burner as I'll let my future self figure this thing out and I'm just going to try to live for today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard for people to connect with how they're going to feel at that later point. And so it's always trying to help clients feel some of that balance. And sometimes it's the other way. Sometimes if you don't spend money on your pool, you're going to have too much money at the end of your plan. And so sometimes it's that more encouragement of spending the money along the way, because sometimes we have excess that we need to potentially account for. And I actually have more clients in that position than I do in the other position.
And I think you said, if I read it right, I saw somewhere that it was being in those situations, getting people to the point where they had more money than they need, or they had more wealth than they could ever spend. That was sort of what hit you as the like, wait a minute, my job's not just to do this numbers thing, this financial planning thing, but you were like, hang on, there's the human element to it as well. Am I remembering that right? Well, didn't it have something to do with like you were helping people get all this money and you realize they were building their net worth, but you realized they were going to basically die with a lot of money. And so that sort of like sparked this interest.
Yeah, absolutely. So you see these cases where you run a financial plan and there's just a ridiculous amount of money at the end of the plan. And then it's trying to help support a client through finding out how much is enough, because everyone's enough number feels different. Everybody feels secure in different ways with different numbers. And so there's a whole set of conversations over sometimes years that need to evolve to help clients kind of dial in where that needs to be. But then also making decisions to maybe not have that much. So I think it's a failure of a plan if somebody dies with $20 million. And so the goal is then to potentially help them to use some of that money. And some of that is that die with zero kind of principle. And maybe I don't have any plans that I want them to literally die with zero, but there are some aspects of, that thought process that I think it's our job to help clients enjoy their money and maximize their happiness in their life with money. And so, I'm not a big fan of the FIRE movement, or I don't typically take on clients that are so frugal and just so proud that they're saving 80% of their money and they're not living and not enjoying. I don't connect as well with that group. I feel I'm in that balance group of we need to have enough for the long run and enjoy the rest of your money along the way. And I think that's where I sit in that spectrum.
Okay. I want to talk in a minute about how you do that, how you help them find balance and spend the money. But you just said something interesting, that you generally, or you'll sometimes not take clients on that have the like high savings frugality mindset. How did you come to that decision? And part of me wonders through this, not that it's right or wrong, or maybe it is right, not that it's wrong, but I was just sitting there thinking like, on one hand, I can make the case, I can say, well, Emily, if you work with people in that situation with that mindset, you could have a big impact, right? You could help them not be as frugal and spend their money. So what went into, do you actually not take them on? And then like what goes into that thought process?
Yeah, I think it depends on how strongly they feel about it. So if they have a whole identity around being this person that's going to retire at 40 years old and they're just being so frugal and it's so hardwired to them, I don't know that I have the skill set to really completely reverse that thinking. And I think that clients that are already at least a little bit in that more balanced phase, we're going to just work together better, because otherwise everything I say is going to be a threat to their identity and a threat to what they feel is super important. And I think about it now, like I had so much fun in my 20s and 30s and I traveled and I enjoyed these different experiences, and I'm glad I had those because I'm tired now. I have 2 small kids. Like I don't want to go out late. And, sometimes I think about how when people are just in that phase of I'm going to eat beans and rice or ramen noodles and I'm going to save 80% of my pay, it's just a lot harder for me to kind of get them moved over into what I feel is a happier balance in life.
Yeah. Amazing, fantastic point about it's at some level, it's an identity thing, right? And like getting you'd be running up against their identity, and it's really hard to be able to change somebody's identity. certainly as a financial planner with a financial planning skill set. But I mean, find somebody that's like a therapist of some sort. Like that's one of the hardest things you can do is try to change somebody's identity. Right. So I think that makes a lot of sense. It's like, it's more than anything. It's like, not that you don't want to help them, but it's sort of like, you're not even sure if we'll use you as an example, but like, are you equipped with the skills and what you need to be able to even do that? Meanwhile, and also, let's just be real, and the way that the advisory business works is you have a certain capacity. You can't work with everybody, right? So there will be enough people out there who want to strike the balance that you can help strike the balance.
Exactly. And there are plenty of advisors who do amazing work with the fire community, and their mindsets are more aligned. And so nobody ever asks their advisor what their personal biases are or how they think about money themselves. I never get asked that question in intro or discovery. And I think that is important. And so I do screen for that. Just like I will talk to somebody who is very, very investment focused, and they don't really care as much about the tax planning work or the goals and values or some of those other pieces that we do. Yeah. And I know that I don't want to spend every single meeting talking about the markets and talking about investments. And so I just know that's also not a good fit. I think that's a luxury in our business to be able to niche, not just with maybe by profession or other heuristics, but also to say, is this a good personality fit where I'm not going to be abrasive to them in some way, or I'm really not going to try to change them significantly. Ultimately, they just need to talk to a more fire-oriented or more investment-focused type of advisor. And the people that find me, I just want to work with nice, kind, intentional people who want to enjoy life and enjoy their money. And I want to work with them on that. That's fun for me. I want to sit across the table and help you solve for that. So that's something that I think that I've learned over time is working with people who already have maybe at least somewhere in the neighborhood of a similar thought process or biases that maybe I hold.
Do you have a good filter for finding the nice, kind, enjoyable people? Like when you go book a call or meeting on the website, is one of the questions, are you nice, kind, and enjoyable? Or is it just a gut feeling when you meet them?
Yeah, it's gut feeling. So we have an intro meeting, we have a discovery meeting. We're typically having a great conversation with clients. And I just know I want to work with people I love and I care about. I love my clients. I enjoy talking to them. I'm curious about them. I want to learn about what's going on with them. And so I want to essentially select people that I want to love my job. I want to love what I'm doing 40 hours a week. And I want to enjoy each of these conversations. And so I think also that becomes enjoyable for them. So if we're all feeling the love, I think we're going to have a much better conversation, much deeper connection. And we're going to get there where we need to go with their financial plan better, because we're going to build that trust and build that relationship a lot easier.
There it is. That's the marketing business development hack. Make sure that we're all feeling the love and everybody wins. Yeah. And the client experience hack. Make sure we're all feeling the love. You just mentioned the intro discovery meeting. I do want to come back to that because we went into it a little bit a minute ago when we were talking about uncovering values and goals. I do want to zoom back out and talk through that, but want to make sure we finish this conversation around how do you help people strike balance, right? And specifically, like, because you mentioned the people that are just frugal mindset, that's their identity. They won't spend. They're like, they like to like tell you about the job, how great they are at saving money, how they like drove to 3 stores to save $1, how they've got coupons stacked up. And you're like, okay, this is a little bit much. So there's that crowd. But even those who you're running these Monte Carlo simulations and they're on track to have more wealth than they need, and you can help them strike the balance, it's still, I would argue, maybe tell me if you've experienced differently, it's still not easy, right? It's still not an easy thing to do to get people to switch into this. Like, hey, I'm really good at saving and I've got all this money. I'm going to just go spend. Like, nobody praises spending. We don't really teach people very well how to spend. So how do you go about doing that? Right? Or is it easier than I think? Maybe that's the first question. And then what have you found that works to help people go about doing that and strike a better balance and not die with $20 million in their bank account?
You do say that nobody celebrates spending. We do. We had these cards created that I'm a big
nice.
on them. Like, you did it. Like, good job spending money. Because we do, even though I don't work with that fire community, a lot of my clients do trend towards a little bit more frugality. That's how they've built up and accumulated.
Right. It's just a natural byproduct of having the amount of money to invest to be able to work with you is you have to save or get a big event or get some good returns. Hang on real quick. What do these cards say and when do you send them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's a big star, like a cartoon star. And it said, you did it. And on the inside, we'll typically say, congratulations on making this purchase. And there are other things we do. We celebrate when clients hit milestone net worth. So you become a millionaire, 2 millionaire, 5 millionaire, whatever those milestones are, we kind of track for that. And we like to celebrate just sometimes that goal achievement of that spending. Congratulations on paying down this debt. Congratulations on spending that money. And I actually sent out, I had a client say, well, I don't need validation for this. And I said, sure you do. We all need validation, right? So I sent out a sheet of gold star stickers and I said, go put one on your shirt, put one on the fridge. So I think that we do sometimes need to celebrate some of those wins, especially if it's harder to spend money. I have clients who have more money they could ever possibly need, but really struggle to spend it and really struggle to maybe gift some money to their kids while they're young and living and could potentially enjoy that money. And so I try to guide clients through a process to think about what that might look like and maybe explore some of their beliefs around it.
Okay, real quick. Those people out there that are like, I want to get into this, they're going to be annoyed by this, but I've got to come back one more time to the idea. So I'm a big fan and a big believer in celebrating. I'm the worst at practicing it in real life, but I 100% wholeheartedly buy into and believe in the concept and the power of it psychologically and all the things that it does to be good for us. And I'm a hypocrite. And I just recorded a video on it about like the power of celebrating, so on and so forth. So I think I'm locked in this mindset. But let's say that let's say I'm a client and I get to the $2 million point, right? I hit that milestone, for example. Mm-hmm. Am I walking out to my mailbox and getting a opening to my mail, and in there's a card in it that says, congrats, you hit 2 million. Mm-hmm. Emily and Richard love you, love Archer Management. Is that essentially, obviously I'm joking a little bit, but is that essentially what I'm getting?
Yeah.
Okay. It says like a big 2 million in the star on it. And I like that. That's cool. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know. Oh, go ahead.
The one gift that I need to have made that I would love to have is for when people hit the $1 million mark, a comma paperweight, just a paperweight that's the shape of a comma that says welcome to the 2 comma club. So I have not made that happen yet, but that's something that at some point I want to make, that they can just put a paperweight on their desk that reminds them of hitting that milestone.
Well, wouldn't it need to be 2 commas?
Yeah, I think it's adding a comma. So you
adding a comma. Okay. Yeah. You've already had a comma.
Yeah.
Here's an extra comma for you're in the 2 comma club. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to follow back up with you in like a month and see how you're doing on that. That's a cool idea. I like that. It's a little bit different. Okay. So yes, you have these, you want to help clients do a better job of spending their money, not irresponsibly, but in a way that like brings them happiness and joy and helps them enjoy their life. How do you even start going about that? In other words, like you can tell them like, hey, you probably have done this. I think we all have. You're like, look, you're going to have $10 million. And if you spend the amount you're spending, you're going to have this when you die. And it's like, do you want that? And they're like, no. And then you're like, okay, well, what can we spend on? It's not that easy to just flip a switch. So aside from just showing them and telling them, hey, you can spend more, how would you go about, at the end of the day, it's like changing their behavior. How would you go about helping them change to be able to do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's tricky. And I've told my husband this before, I can identify people where I know it's going to take a few years to get there, of starting to spend money. You know that it's not an overnight. There's not one conversation that's going to take somebody from feeling like they don't have enough and that they're not secure into, okay, I'm going to start writing checks to my kids.
What are the signs that say it's going to take multiple years?
Yeah. So when somebody will say something to me, I have a client who said to me, oh, my kids don't need the money. They're financially secure. And, I need to make sure that I'm okay. And I need to make sure that I'm secure. And so when you start to ask those questions of, well, what does that look like for you? So describe what secure means to you. And if they don't really have an answer for that, if they don't have a number or an idea of what that might look like, maybe they haven't really explored that deeply enough to understand for them what that could possibly mean. And, you have to go back in history, right? You have to take a good money history. And sometimes it's just digging back into, why might they feel like they're not secure? I've shown you that you have $20 million at the end of your plan, but that's still not satisfying that feeling. It's not making them feel secure. So it's working on how do I potentially help you explore that a little bit further. And I'll admit to you too, there's only so far I can take certain conversations. We consult with Ashley Kwame on our team, who many of the listeners here know, and I will bring her in. So I have case consulting with her every other week. So every other week I'm talking to her about client cases and how do I improve? This is how the conversation went. Where do I go next with it? How do I improve how I handle that conversation? How do I attack that next conversation? What are some great questions I might be able to ask? How could I better follow up on that question? But also, I have the ability to just book the client with her. And so it's one of those things of, do I have the natural skills right now to help the client in the situation? Or do I need some case consulting? Or do I really just need to put them in the seat where you're directly having that conversation with her? And different clients need different levels of support there.
So is there anything in particular you can think of where you're like, hey, this is something I know that I can do that will, maybe it takes 2 years for them to shift their mindset and get over the hump and be comfortable even starting to spend a little bit more money. But are there any just like proven things that you can do or things that you're going to do to help start that process, to help start that shift?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So part of it is showing the math and part of it is talking through the scenario. So part of it is, we talked about before, understanding their values, understanding their goals, understanding some money history about them as well. So how has money been talked about in their lives so far? What significant money experiences did they experience? And helping maybe them connect a little bit to that as well. But also understanding for some of these clients, I also don't want to be too abrasive with them because they may have people in their lives who are saying, just go spend money. And that can feel like a threat to them. I'm also saying that. And so I don't want to be another person in their life that's saying, oh, stop being so frugal, go spend money. And they may have been kind of protective against that up to this point. So I think just entering it with kindness and curiosity and understanding really where does that mentality come from, helping them maybe connect to that a little bit, but also helping them to envision the life where they don't spend the money. So I think part of asking them the questions of, if we continue on this path and we continue to have this amount of money at the end, what happens then? So what happens if we have $20 million at the end? Or what happens if we have $10 million in a few years? If we continue on this path, what does that look like for you? And help them maybe envision how they might feel at these different set points in the future. Or what age do you think your kids might be when you are in the end of your plan is at 95 years old and you have $20 million at the end of your plan? How old are your kids at that point? So you're telling me that they're secure now and they make a lot of money, but where are they at that phase of their lives? Oh, they probably don't need it then. And so sometimes it's just maybe helping them to envision what that future potentially looks like if we stay on the current course.
Yeah, that's a great point. Helping because the future can be pretty blurry. It can feel out there. Hal Hershfield says we see our future self as a stranger, basically. So it's like you're just as likely to care for that person as you are the neighbor down the street that you've never met. And so it's like, how do we transport them into the future and say, hey, it's the future. You're 95. Your kids are now, say 67, 68. You've got $20 million, right? So and not that you're changing their mind, right? That may not be what you're ultimately trying to do, but the idea is to help them make a better decision, right? By not just making the decision today, but taking them into the future and thinking through it. And like you said, visualizing it, which I think that's an awesome idea and a great idea. You mentioned that money history can play into it, and then it can be helpful to maybe go down that path or talk through that. Can you explain how that impacts the belief system? Like, where does the money history play into the fact that I've got more money than I need and I can't spend?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, money history goes back to, can be conversations in your family that maybe how they talked about money growing up or how you experienced money growing up. So I have a client who had a father who was very entrepreneurial, and he either was doing very well and just splurging and spending, or things were really tight and they were worried that they could pay the tuition bills for school. And so, that kind of played into, now she's accumulated some money and she's worried because she saw what happens when you have money and you spend it. And so that can play into feeling that, if you watched your parents go through a bankruptcy, or you watched friends go through it, or if you yourself experienced a big money event, a foreclosure on a home, bankruptcy, or potentially a relationship where you were in a relationship with somebody who was spending money in a way that made you very uncomfortable and feel insecure and feel that there's instability there. That can play into, even now, many years later, you personally on the balance sheet are perfectly secure. And I can't find a way for you to run out of money. I can't model a Monte Carlo simulation where you run out of money. And so you are, by definition, by the math definition, secure. But those feelings reside in you of remembering when you didn't feel secure. You remember what it felt like when you had that threat of a partner who was spending all of the money, or a parent who spent all of the money, or feeling like there wasn't enough, or feast or famine type of events that happened. And so that can be in your past that then dictate how you feel now and how you feel about spending and what that feels like to spend money.
And then they start tearing up, talking about their family history and family trauma. And that's when you call Ashley and Ashley Kwame, Beyond the Plan, fractional chief behavioral officer. Is that what it is? Or fractional? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And you say, Ashley, this has gone beyond my expertise, and I think I'm going to need a little help.
Yeah. I think financial planners always have to know where their limits are and have that additional support, because sometimes we learn a lot. We learn that we have these conversational skills, but then to learn where there's more here than I think I can maybe influence change on. And either how do you equip me with the skills that I need to move this conversation forward, or how do I plug somebody in the seat with you? And it's very easy in certain life events to say, okay, you're about to retire, I'm going to gift a session with Ashley to you, because there are a lot of emotions that come up with that. So sometimes there are natural timeframes I'll plug her in, but a lot of times she's kind of in the background supporting me in different ways.
When I think about getting people over this hump, striking balance, being comfortable spending, I think half of it, maybe let's not call it half, part of it or an element of it is helping them uncover like the things you just mentioned, right? Understanding their beliefs, where it came from, helping them envision and visualize, hey, this is what it would look like. So you're educating them on those things. I know there's this is a take on a quote. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's basically like, to get somebody to do something, give them a big enough why. Right. So if you have a big enough why, you'll figure out the how. Maybe that's the quote, actually. The whole point of it is like, give people an important why and motivation, and they'll change their behavior. So you've got the part that you just mentioned. And I'm wondering, is there also an element of it where you say, we want you to spend more money because you don't want to die? Well, you don't tell them what to do, right? It's like, hey, if you're going to die at 20 million, then they go, all right, well, what am I going to spend that money on? Right? Like, I feel pretty happy. Like, what would I spend it on? So I would imagine another part of the equation is also helping them think through spending it in a way that they feel like is worth spending it, right? So if you told me as a non-car guy that you're like, hey, look, you got all this money, why don't you go out and buy a new car? Like, that's not really I'm not going to be super pumped and motivated to be like, yeah, you know what? I'll go blow money on something that's not important to me. But if you were like, hey, Brendan, you've got enough money, why don't you go, what is something you'd spend it on that you'd want to spend it on? That would be a good use of your money. I'd come up with something that I want to spend it on, that I'm passionate about, and I'd be more likely to do it. So I'm wondering, is that part of the discussion or the process as well, is not just saying, hey, you can spend more, but helping them envision where they could be using it in a way that motivates them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I use a wheel of life exercise as part of our process, because I like to, it's hard to ask somebody that open-ended question of, hey, Brendan, if I gave you X dollars, what would you spend it on? Sometimes people can't see all those possible places of where to place that money. But if you help to understand, how do they feel about their health? How do they feel about their physical environment or their home? How do they feel about their relationships and spirituality and their career and their personal growth and all of these areas? You can then identify where those gaps are and help them potentially set goals there. And so one of the types of questions I'll ask some of my more frugal clients. So let's say they score lower on health, for example.
So Wheel of Life, for anybody that doesn't know or hasn't seen it, right? It's just basically this wheel, big circle. And then it has a bunch of important categories in life around it, right? So it's like health and relationships, family. Well, you would probably know better than me, right? What are some of the ones? Do you remember what some of the other ones that are on there? It's like
personal growth, spirituality, your career, money, how you feel about money, health, your home environment. All of those different pieces are just different dimensions of wellness, essentially.
And then it asks you to essentially score or rank how you're doing in these areas. So effectively what it does is it forces you to sit down and go, hey, in the areas of life that are important to me, how am I doing? It's just this like a powerful assessment exercise to pause and go, how am I doing in this? Right. And so anyways, go ahead and take it from there. I just want to make sure for anybody that didn't know what the wheel of life was, that they had a somewhat of an idea as you explain it.
Because I think, we've got those default answers when I ask, how are you or what's new? We get these certain answers, but when you start to drill in on these specific areas, you can learn a little bit more. And so one of the questions I'll ask a client, if they score low on health, for example, I'll note that and say, tell me why you scored it this way. And what would it look like? Scaling question. So you scored a 3 out of 10. What would a 3.5 look like for you? And helping to understand what that looks like. But I also ask them at this use it or lose it question of, okay, Brendan, you scored a 3 out of 10 on health. That's something that appears to be important to you here. And if you had $5,000 cash on the table right in front of you right now, and you had to spend it on your health, you can't give it away, you can't spend it anywhere else. And if you don't spend it on your health, it's use it or lose it. That money goes away. You had to spend that to improve your health. How would you do that? How would you apply that money? And so asking people those types of questions, sometimes you have to ask people questions about money that's not theirs. Like, I'm not asking you, Brendan, go into your checking account right now and pull $5,000 out and spend it on your health. It's cash on the table in front of you that's going to go away. And so sometimes maybe envisioning what that spend might look like. Oh, well, I might get a personal trainer or buy a Peloton bike, or these are the things that I might do with it. And we're now creating some more tangible goals to potentially set. It's sometimes our role is maybe helping people to envision all these possible ways they might spend money. So if I move to a new place and I'm feeling lonely, where can I apply some time, money, or attention to help improve this one aspect of my life that feels low, like relationships or spirituality? So it might be finding a class or spending money in a certain area that helps to improve my overall wellness and add more balance to that wheel.
Big fan of that question of, if you had this and you had to spend it, otherwise it goes away, how would you spend it? Because it takes away all the like, well, but I wouldn't do that. And it's like, no, hang on. If you just had to focus on this, if you say health is important, because if you also, by the way, if you've done their values, and they say health is important, it's important. Then they go and they score it and it's a 3. And you're like, okay, well, you said this is important. You're only a 3. If you had to spend $5,000 to get you from a 3 to a 3.5, what would it be? Right. I think that's a really cool way to think through. What I'm wondering is, does it work as seamlessly as I imagine it in my head, where you ask that question, they go, oh, I'd hire a personal trainer to come to my house and work me out. And then they go, you know what? I'm going to do it. Great point, Emily. I need to spend that money. I'm going to hire a personal trainer. Does it work that well?
Everything takes time. So I add it as a goal tile in their overall plan, and I check in. So I have certain things I'll check in with clients on, and then I will send a card and celebrate somebody making that type of decision. So congratulations, you've hired a personal trainer. Those types of things are things that I like to celebrate. So I tell clients all the time, if they're partnered up, there's a lot of, I want you to have high fives. I want you to celebrate. I want you to enjoy and celebrate these little milestones that you have every time you pay off a debt or hit a milestone in your savings balance, or, hey, I maxed out my 401k for the first time. I want cheering. I want jumping. I want celebratory dance. I want high fives. I'm going to send you a card. I would put confetti in if it wasn't annoying to most people who receive it that way. But I really enjoy celebrating those different milestones, because I think that also then encourages that additional behavior.
If I look at the website for Archer Investment Management and on some of the services you provide, one of the near the top is the values aligned goal planning. And in there, one of the things that's listed is an intentional spending plan. Is that along the lines of what we've been talking about when I see that, or is that something different entirely?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Okay. That's what I was hoping you would say. That's what I figured, but I just wanted to double check. Let's go back for a second. Actually, before we do that, let me ask you this. Thinking about helping people use the money that they have, overcome this mindset shift so they spend the money so they can enjoy their life. Anything else that you feel like needs to be said or pointed out on that, as far as like what works, what to know, what to do?
Yeah, I think part of when I say sometimes it takes years with people is having a whole bank of different possible questions or angles to address that same type of question. And so I'm a collector of questions. I love good questions. And I know you do too. I've even joked with you before that I've had to stop listening to your podcast for certain points. I'm like, no more questions. I'm maxed out, right?
Yeah. Right.
Listen, I just add more really neat, interesting questions that I've collected over time. And so sometimes it's saying, I'm going to kind of take this tact or take this approach of maybe envisioning the future if you don't, spend money or don't give, or some of those types of things, or that use it or lose it type of question, or wheel of life exercise, or the no meat exercise. You're kind of attacking it from a few different angles. It takes people time because I can't just tell people what to do. We know that doesn't work. And so they ultimately need to potentially arrive there. And so I'll typically kind of go back to that question bank. And so sometimes I also like people to envision, what would a really good gift to you look like? So for somebody who isn't good at spending money themselves, I said somebody was to surprise and delight you and give you the most perfect possible gift to you under a Christmas tree or a gift of travel. What might that look like? And so it's just kind of angling it and looking at that same problem in a lot of different ways and finding the right question to maybe prompt them with. And I always send those questions ahead of time, or I generally try to do that to say, hey, I was thinking about you and I was thinking about our meeting coming up, and I was curious about this one question I have for you. And just I don't want to put you on the spot in the meeting, but I want to potentially prepare you that this is something I've been thinking about when it comes to you. And I'm going to just put this in the email. If it's something you're comfortable sharing, I'd love to talk about this in our upcoming meeting. So I tend to kind of select questions and kind of pull those off of my spreadsheet and say, what might work in this conversation that might continue to move this process along of eventually getting somebody to the point where I'm sending them a card celebrating a spend that they've made that maybe didn't feel possible to them just a short time previously.
Nothing makes me happier than hearing that you have a question spreadsheet. I would love to just take a look at those tabs. That must be amazing. That's amazing. Okay. On that point, that's a good segue back into what I said we were going to come back to. You mentioned actually before we hit record, some version of you've always, in the work that you've done, you had always kind of done some of the elements of the what I call the human side, right? Mm-hmm. You'd always done some of those things, and you had good communication skills. You converse well with your clients. You thought about money as more than just maximizing net worth, and then you realized you probably needed some more of a process or framework, or to not just do it. Not piecing it together, but trying to pull it into something that can be more repeatable, right? So that's kind of what you mentioned that earlier. So why don't you take us, in order to figure out sort of how you've done that, why don't you take us through the process that you use, mm-hmm. From what do you do in an intro meeting that's different from the discovery, and then what do you do after that, and where are you weaving in these frameworks from the human side that you've learned to amplify those meetings, to make them better? And for example, right, you mentioned the goals and values meeting earlier, and some of the things that you do in there. You mentioned that you put together this plan that has their values on it. You have the life wheel. So I think in my mind, I'm just trying to piece through, okay, what does this flow like from first meeting somebody to getting all of it and then becoming a client and that sort of thing? So can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some 20 years of my career, just about, I think the first 13, 14, 15 years, I felt that, I'm great at talking to clients. We have a good relationship, helping them with the questions that they have. And then I think there's this shift where I started to recognize that, this is a really good exercise I did with this one client, or a great conversation that I had, or this was a cool tax tip I told them, or help them get organized here. And I realized I want to do everything for everyone, and I need to get organized myself. And so I think that was a moment for me during COVID, where I went from meeting with people in person to meeting with people online, and just getting really organized with my processes so that I take everybody through that one really cool question I asked that one client. I want to ask everybody, how do I do that? And, this one kind of tool that I took one client through, how do I take everybody through that process? Because every client has a little bit different experience with you, depending on what they need and where they are in life. But there are some consistencies that make sense. And so
wait, hang on. When you mentioned it, you said that the one client that I took them through. Was there actually a situation with one client that you did it and you thought, wow, I want to replicate this?
I think that comes up a lot of different times. So you think of anything, if it's something technical, like, oh, I helped this client through a multi-year Roth conversion strategy, or I helped them get their estate planning documents done, or reviewed their insurance. There are these different things that we do when asked. And then it's, well, everyone deserves that. Everyone needs everything. But how do you do that? How do you build a process? And when I'm this collector of questions, like, oh man, Megan Lartz came on another podcast and asked this really cool question. Well, where do I plug that in? And how do I ask everybody that question? And so what we developed is we named our meetings and then came up with the content for each one. And I have jot form questionnaires and certain questions and workflows for each one and agendas for each one. So I have now, well, this is our intro meeting. And of course, we're going to talk about this and ask these questions and cover this topic, not because I don't know how to talk to clients and introduce myself and see if it's a good fit to work together, but because I know I'm better when throughout the entire process, I've covered everything with every single client. And that rather than just having a handful of clients that I know I've developed a great relationship with, it's how do I do that with every single client? How do I develop that great relationship? How do I go deeper with every single client? How do I ask all of them that really good question I learned on that podcast? And so naming the meetings and setting up agendas and workflows for each one was absolutely important to do that.
Real quick, can you explain what you mean by workflows, like setting up, because I think we all know what an agenda means, but just in case anybody's wondering, like, what does that mean to set up a workflow for the type of meeting? What does that look like?
Yeah. So in our CRM system, we use Wealthbox. We have the ability to set up a workflow, which is a series of tasks, which can be pre-meeting, in-meeting, post-meeting tasks. And so some of those workflow items would be, well, reach out to the client to schedule the meeting. Another workflow item would be send the agenda. Another workflow item would be check to see if they did the work, if we're asking them to fill out a jot form. And so it's just taking through that. I am obsessed with workflows because it allows me to think about every question for every client or every step for every client. And you can't delegate what you don't define and name and label and set a step for. So part of what's been really important for my growth is being able to say, which of these tasks do I need to do? And which of these tasks can be done by somebody else on the team who's best suited to do that? So if I have a 72-step workflow to get prepared for a client's meeting, then I know what steps I need to cover and I can assign those. And I know everything is being done thoroughly for every single meeting for every single client.
Is 72 about the number of steps in the workflow?
I do have, I have at least 35 workflows, and a lot of them have many steps. But it's things like if I know that a client's having a baby, for example, there's 15 steps on that workflow. Congratulate them, check their life insurance, check if they're saving enough for college. It's all those things because we want to remember to do everything around each of these client questions, events, or meetings that are coming up.
Okay. So for somebody that's listening, who's thinking, okay, I like this idea because it makes it a little bit more repeatable and consistent, and I can delegate it, and I'm not expending mental energy trying to remember what I need to do and have I done it. And they're like, I want to start doing that. And then they heard you say that there's 72 steps for a meeting workflow. Is it possible to start smaller and then grow from there? Did you start smaller? Like, what would you say to somebody that's like, great idea? 72 sounds like a lot.
Yeah. It's writing down first what you think needs to happen. But every time I train somebody new and I'm talking to them through the process, I'm finding, well, what's actually in my head that I'm doing and not writing down? So what's a step when I'm going to do a final check on a financial plan to make sure we have all the data correct? What are the things I'm doing to actually to check that box? And so I have increased those over time. I don't think there's a week that goes by that I'm not adding a workflow step in one place or another, because it helps me to make sure that we're doing all the checks and balances. You think about a pre-flight checklist for a pilot. They're going to, regardless of how many times they've flown, they're going to check everything. There's an entire checklist, and then they're going to debrief after the flight, right? So I like to take that into financial planning as well.
Yeah, you better hope that they do that, right? We're all thankful that they do that. I don't want my pilot waking up having a bad day, forgetting what to do. I want him to have that checklist that keeps him on point.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine. I'm a good pilot.
Yeah. I've done this 100 times before. I'm sure it's good. Yeah. Okay. So what happens in this intro meeting? What do you send out? You said you have jot forms for meetings. Do you send things out before that? what are you doing in that meeting?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we send out an agenda ahead of time just to say, these are the questions that we're going to ask you. The kind of the why are you here question. What's your experience been like working with an advisor previously? If you have those types of questions. So I let them know that basically the goal of that meeting is to see if I can take them where they want to go. So are my skills and the way I do this work a match for what you're seeking? And so we're seeking that fit for, and what I tell them in the meeting too is, this is a conversation to see if it makes sense to continue the conversation. So I let them know that this isn't a conversation where they're deciding whether or not to work with me. We're deciding together, does it make sense to continue this conversation and move on into a discovery meeting? And we can get there pretty quickly. It's a 30-minute meeting.
Do you, when I go to the website, I see you have a Meet Emily Rassam video.
Mm-hmm.
Do you send that out beforehand to them so that it's like, hey, here's who I am, so you can meet me?
No, I should. That is something else.
New step. Add the step to the workflow.
73 steps on my workflow now.
73. Okay. And then you said 30 minutes for that meeting?
It's booked for 45. Usually it's a 30 to 45 minute conversation.
Okay. Any favorite questions from your questions spreadsheet that you deploy in that conversation?
Because I don't really get into the deeper questions there. That's more for the discovery meeting. So this is really just a fit part, because also I ask too many deeper questions. One, I'm going to fall in love with them and they're going to fall in love with me, right? That happens when we start to get into these cool questions. One, it's probably too early in the relationships to maybe ask some of those questions. But two, I also want to really objectively see, is this a potential fit to continue talking? And so I generally just learn what they're looking for. I generally share a little bit about what we do and say, great, this sounds like a great match for us to continue this conversation. Let's book the discovery meeting. By the way, I'm going to send you some really cool questions ahead of time because I'd love to get to know you better in this next meeting. So that's one of my goals for that meeting, is to understand you better and to, again, make sure that I can take you where you want to go. And so that's part of how I frame up how that next meeting is going to go.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because the framing is important. So what do you send beforehand for them to do prior to the discovery meeting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they're doing a Wheel of Life exercise for that meeting.
That's where the Wheel of Life comes in. Okay.
That's where the Wheel of Life comes in. So the other assessments like Know Me, we're doing that later in the goals and values meeting, but Wheel of Life is something that we do ahead. And then we send them questions in an agenda. So the questions are going to be, if I could change one thing about your financial life, what would that potentially be? Where would you like to start first in a financial planning process? That if you had $50 million land in your bank account, what would you do with it? How would you feel? Some of those types of questions we're sending ahead of time so that they are prepared to potentially answer it. And I still ask for permission to ask those questions when I get into that meeting setting. But it allows them to kind of see, these are the types of things I'm really curious about you, to learn more about who you are and what's important to you.
And those questions are in a jot form. Is that right?
So on the agenda, they go out on the agenda ahead of time. So the jot form, we actually start to collect information from the client, and that's after they've onboarded or when they're in the onboarding process.
That's after. Okay. All right. So these questions are on the agenda. And then the life wheel, is that like a PDF that they're looking at, that they're working through or using?
Yeah. So actually that is a jot form. So that's fair. So it's a jot form where they're scoring how they feel about those different areas. And then I plug it into a Wheel of Life tool that basically then pinpoints where they are on the Wheel of Life. So if there's two people in the meeting, we're going to have both of their Wheel of Life, the represented diagram, and then we're going to talk through that a little bit too. So that helps me to collect some of those items I'm going to show later in the financial plan build, because I'm going to be listening for some interesting things that I can bring up in those future processes too.
Is there any money conversation that's happening in this meeting? Because it sounds like a lot of the questions that are on the agenda, the ones you just mentioned to us, like, yeah, sure, money's tied to them, but there's no direct money question like, how much have you saved? How much do you have saved? What do you have invested? What's your investing? Like, there's no data gathering component to it, I suppose, from what I can gather. So I'm just wondering, is there a money element to the conversation, or is it mostly like this, hey, let's figure out where you want to go discovery conversation?
Yeah. So we're ultimately screening for assets on our website. So
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
You go to book a call with us. What we basically say on there is our process works best for families who've accumulated $1 million or more, and they have to answer yes or no on that. We have them answer a few questions. And then ultimately, if it's no, we have resources that we send them, potentially where to maybe go look for a planner, or they can then book my calendar if they answer yes, that they've met that screening question. So typically when they come into the intro meeting, we already know they meet that threshold. I don't want to make the intro and discovery meeting about their specific assets or investments. And I frankly don't want to talk about what we do with investments in that meeting unless they ask that question, because I don't want to focus my time there in the conversation. And I don't want to make that a selling point. I don't sell people on an investment strategy. I'm selling people on the experience and the relationship and where we're ultimately going. And so that's where I focus my discovery meeting on.
And so if I'm sitting there looking at it going, all right, yeah, here that if I had unlimited money, these are the goals I'd want to accomplish. I want to make sure I pay for my kids' education and save enough to be able to retire, because I'm sure if they're talking to a financial planner, like these are some of the things that are coming up. They're top of mind. I wonder, is there some element of do you explain at some point, like, hey, here's why I'm asking this. Here's how we're going to help you do that, right? Like, as opposed to just like helping you uncover goals, do you make a connection in the discovery meeting where it's like, okay, here's how we help you do that? Or does that come later?
Yeah. So what I do at the end of the discovery meetings, I show them a sample financial plan, and this is where I connect the goals back in, because what I'm sharing with them is, life is lumpy. And so if you go onto a financial planning calculator online, you're going to get some straight line answer, but who spends the same amount of money every single year? And so what I then reflect back on is there are different years you're going to do a home improvement project or purchase a vehicle or take a big family vacation. I'm going to say some of the things that they've told me. And so we want to kind of tailor your plan, your spending plan, your investing decisions, all of that to your goals. Your goals drive the entire financial planning process. And that shows up in the tax plan as well. So how much you plan to spend in a particular year influences potentially what your tax rates and tax brackets look like for that year too. So I can't do a good tax plan for you and save you tax money if I don't know how you plan to spend your money and what's important to you. So everything comes back to the goals. And I just think of it as a tailoring or molding of the overall financial plan and the math to those goals.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you framed it that way before the meeting. You said, hey, here's what we're going to be doing and why we're doing it. And I'm sure you probably explained what you just said. I'm sure you probably explained throughout, like, hey, this is why we're doing this, so that we can map your money to your goals. So then you have the discovery meeting. Is it at that point, what comes next? Maybe that's probably the best question. What comes after that?
Yeah. So, and this is something that sometimes I think you disagree on this point. We will typically do a sleep on it call. So we will basically tell them. I don't
fully disagree. We'll save that conversation for another time.
Yeah. And so in the beginning of the meeting, what I tell them is, I'm not going to ask you to decide today. There's no pressure in this process whatsoever. We're going to go through. I want to share a little bit more about what we do. I want to learn a lot more about you, what's important to you. I'd love to show you a sample of how we actually do that, because so far all we've done is I've talked with my hands about what we do. And I want to be able to show you on a screen what that potentially looks like. So what are you actually receiving when you receive a financial plan? What does that look like? And so what I will tell them is, typically I'll let you kind of digest and think of additional questions you might have. And I like to just check in with you and see what questions popped up overnight, how you might feel from that point. And then we go from there. And typically then in the sleep on it call, they will then decide if they're going to move forward. We're going to send them a contract. But sometimes people do come to the end of the discovery meeting ready to move forward, and we just move forward. I'm not going to say, no, I need you to sleep on it first. It's if they're ready, if I'm getting all of those signals that they're ready, if they're telling me, no, we really want to move forward now, this sounds exactly what we're looking for, absolutely, we're going to move forward. But I also like to take the pressure off in the beginning of the discovery meeting so that they don't feel the whole meeting like, when is she going to turn salesy? Like, when is she going to stop being this like friendly, kind person and turn into like, now I'm going to ask you for your money type of situation?
No, we see it the same way. My philosophy is the platinum rule of prospecting, because the platinum rule in life is treat people the way that they want to be treated, right? So just treat prospects the way that they want to be treated. Let them do what they want to do. So if you have somebody that wants to sleep on it, let them sleep on it. Don't pressure them. If you have somebody that's ready to move forward and they're like, yeah, this is definitely what we want to do. They're excited. They're like, hey, this is going to be great for us and our family. I personally believe, and can make a strong case, that it's pretty selfish in a way to go, no, I want you to go sleep on it. And it's like, well, I get where it comes from. It's just to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense if somebody's like got the motivation, they're ready, they knows what they want to do. But that's a different conversation. So I think we see it the same way, just to clarify. Then, okay, so they become a client, and then what happened? They sign the paperwork. What starts happening after that? Because it sounds like at some point they've done the life wheel, but you mentioned earlier that you have it was a jot form for values, or the Know Me option to uncover some of this stuff. So where does that start coming into the conversation?
So the very first thing we do, especially when we're talking to clients who are understanding that there's economic turbulence and volatility, we want to get their investments right. So we do an investment onboarding meeting with them next, where we help bring in their assets if we're going to manage assets for them, understand their investment history, their preferences, their values around investment. So we do an investment meeting and then get their assets transferred over. Once the assets are here, then we kick off our financial plan build process. So that starts with a goals and values meeting. So we're sending them the Know Me exercise plus a jot form to go with it to ask some additional specific questions beyond what's inside of Know Me. So we're doing a goals and values intake before we're looking at their tax returns and estate planning documents, insurance files, things like that. We want to get to know further. So we have a goals and values meeting with them. Ashley joins that meeting. So one of the things Ashley Kwame is doing is helping to write down any money beliefs or biases or things she's identified that are important to note. We want to put that in our internal CRM system so that we can all remember some of those specific beliefs that they maybe hold that are important for us to keep front of mind as we're working on their plan. We're going to gather all of those specific goals that then are going to go into Right Capital. We're going to gather the words that we're going to put on the front page of their financial plan. And we're going to talk about what priority set we're going to have leading into the plan. So, we can solve one thing for you, or what do you hope or expect to hear out of a plan delivery? If we could make some of these goals come true, what would be most important to you? So understanding those prioritizations is really important. So when I'm starting to look at the data, I've got the context of the person in my mind. So once they finish the goals and values meeting, we've done that whole intake, we send them a list of documents to gather. So it used to be when I would ask them for all these documents, if that's their first or second experience with me of, oh man, she just sent me all this homework, that it takes longer to build the plan. And some people just don't come up with all the documents. But if you've had a great engaging goals and values conversation of, how do we make all these fun things happen for you? And, I expressed to them too, I'm really excited to build this plan. This looks really exciting to me, and get that enthusiasm and momentum into the actual document gathering process. We're going to fire off that list, and the completion time, it has really shortened. So people are getting documents to us faster because they're excited to see the plan too. We just talked about all these fun things. You're going to create this bucket list for me, and you're going to make this happen. And so let's get there. Let's get you the data you need to finish your job so we can then deliver that plan and see the results of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I mean, data gathering, no matter what, is never easy. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're at. It's not something that's just like seamless and quick. Nobody's figured out how to make it this like instant turnaround, but we're all trying to figure out these ways like, okay, how do I make sure that I get the data? And it's like, well, I think maybe the most powerful thing you can do is give them a really, really powerful, motivating reason and vision as to why they should go through what is truly a hassle to gather and upload all their documents. And there's really no better way to do that than to get them have an entire meeting dedicated to their goals and values. Right now, it's like, I don't really feel like staying up late and finding all my paperwork and uploading it and scanning it in. But if it means that I'll be able to take my family on this trip, we're going to go back to the trip example. Or if it means that I'm going to be able to do these things that are important to me, then I'll probably stay up a little bit later and find the documents when I get the chance. Right? That you get all that, and then when you go to deliver the plan, is there in that meeting, is there anything in particular that you do where you think like, hey, this is something that's probably a little bit different than what the typical plan delivery meeting looks like through the lens of like the human side?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one thing I'm just thinking about a training session with somebody on my team I just did recently is I shared with her the different anchor points where I pause and ask questions, because in delivery, it's really easy to say, let me tell you, let me show you, let me tell you, let me show you. All these things.
Yeah. You're like excited about it. You're just kind of like, hey, look at this. Look at all the work that we've done. You can accomplish your goals. And it's just really easy to get into this like monologue presentation mode, right? Which it's not bad. but it's also not great. So how did you explain it to, who is it that you were talking to about this?
So on my team of planner, Cheney, who I'm training right now to be able to have some of these frontline conversations, I'm just showing her, here are some anchors that remind me to stop, slow down, breathe, ask a question, get a reaction from the client, get them talking a little bit too through the process, because nobody wants to be spoken to for an hour, even when it's about their data and about their plan. It's still keeping an interactive conversation. And that's where on those talk metrics, we have AI note taker. On those talk metrics, they're the worst on financial plan delivery meetings, because the type of meeting that it is mostly for me to share what observations we've made. And we've even said, we can't cover as many topics because I need to leave room for them to talk and enjoy this experience and spend time with their reaction to some of the things I'm sharing with them, or how that's landing, and understand what that looks like before we move on. And sometimes we have to just say, let's stop. This is the end of the hour, and let's go into a part 2 meeting where we can finish, because it's more important for me to have a conversation with the client than it is for me to get all of my recommendations out in 1 hour.
What are your anchor points that remind you to pause or to stop or keep them engaged?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So sometimes it's the eyeball emoji that I mentioned, the 2 eyeballs on the plan to remind me to just stop, look, or a yield sign, give myself a little emoji. But typically it's, as you're moving through, any financial planning software has different tabs. And so you're going to move into, okay, we're going to take a look at your net worth, your balance sheet, your debt. But each time you go to click into a new area to talk, or click into an estate plan, tax plan, insurance plan, projections, and all those pieces, those are moments in the plan to stop, and never to go from one section and then immediately start talking about the next one. You have to let some conversation happen between each of those tabs. That's the most natural break point there.
What are you asking any particular question as you pause and break? Is it just sort of like, okay, are you just saying, are you getting to the point where you switch to the next tab, or you see the eyeball emojis and you're just asking something as simple as, what questions do you have? Does that make sense? Do you have any questions? Or are you on your question spreadsheet? Is there something else that you like to try to drum up some engagement or keep them engaged, as opposed to just, and I think about this from a presentation standpoint a lot, and teaching standpoint, is it's really easy, I think, to ask, what questions do you have? Do you have any questions?
Mm-hmm.
But I just wonder, is there anything else that you do or ask that's maybe beyond that, to try to facilitate some discussion and conversation?
Yeah. So when we go to the goal tiles, for example, I'll share, there are a lot of goals you've shared with me over the previous meetings that we've had. How does it feel to look at them all on one page? So asking that type of question, just to say, you're viewing some of this data for the first time about yourself. How do you feel about that? So sometimes it's, you've never seen all of your money in one place before. What's your reaction to your net worth number here? So how do you feel about that? And what are you seeing here? So sometimes the process of organizing everything, whether you're organizing your pantry or organizing your financial data, sometimes just seeing an organized version of your financial plan, you can say, how do you feel about seeing your liquidity? So how much you have in cash across all of your accounts? How do you feel about how much you have invested? How do you feel about how much you have in Roth versus pre-tax money? Each thing, it's just checking in to say, how does this land for you? And you can get some different conversations about that. So I ask more specific questions like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's really good. Just asking, how are you feeling? What do you think when you see this? And even from the standpoint of, if they're seeing everything organized for the first time, they may be feeling some sense of, like, I don't know about joy, maybe a little too strong, probably some sense of relief or satisfaction, happiness. Like, it's a good feeling. And there's research out there in the psychology fields that talk about feeling something is different than naming it when you feel it. Like, there's a lot of power that goes in, like, saying out loud and recognizing and naming what you're feeling. So you may be like, well, what's the point of that? Like, they feel good, they feel good. And it's like, well, yeah, you want them to feel good, but also if you can get them to, like, recognize that they feel good, that's really powerful, both for them, right? But also, like, for the client experience and possible referrals and all the stuff that goes with that. So I think I really like that. I think that's great.
Yeah. And part of it is part of when I'm talking about money history, I also like to, if there's 2 people in the conversation, I want to know what their conversations are like about each of these topics. So sometimes people aren't comfortable with the "how are you feeling" question. That already makes people feel uncomfortable.
Right.
And so in an investment history conversation, I'm going to ask about, if you think back to this last downturn, what were the conversations like in your household? So sometimes there's a way to ask that without specifically saying, "how are you feeling?" And I can gauge which clients are comfortable answering that type of question versus the, how did you two celebrate? Do you remember the moment that you reached $1 million asset level? Do you remember this moment? And what were the conversations like between you at that time? Or how did you two talk through your estate planning document gathering process? How did you talk during tax time when you filed your tax return? Sometimes that's a different way of asking that "how are you feeling" question.
How did you celebrate when you reached $1 million? And they think, or what do you remember about that? And they go, I remember going to the mailbox and getting the card that said congratulations for reaching $1 million. All right, as we sort of come to the end here, we went through, obviously not in super deep detail, the process and where you figured out ways to turn it into more of a framework and process for a consistent humanized experience. Is there any element in there that we haven't hit on? Anything that you do that you think is important to mention that we haven't gotten to?
Yeah, I think more or less I want to just double down on the workflows and organization process. It's such an underrated part of the process of just organizing your steps that you want to take your clients through. And I think that whenever I think about any topic that I'm speaking on or talking about, it's really comes down to your processes. And so to be a good financial planner, sure, having a good bank of questions is a great place to start. Listening to this podcast or reading great books, great place to start. But if you don't have that process to create that consistency, to deliver that consistent result to clients, you're always going to feel behind. So I think that that's what I want to just double down on is workflows, processes are absolutely everything in this field.
I'm having visions of doing since this is mostly an audio podcast, visions of doing a webinar of some sort where it's like, hey, here are the workflows that you can put into place. All right, but I'm going to write that down as a future possibility.
That's my most popular, when I do speaking for a Holistic Plan, I can talk about technical tax planning strategies.
Right.
My most popular webinars are on the processes, on the workflows. Like, how do you actually do this work and build it into your CRM system?
That makes a lot of sense. Doesn't surprise me. All right. We're going to move into the rapid fire 3-pack of questions if you're ready.
Ready.
All right. Number 1, you get to gift a book to everybody that's listening. What would it be?
I have to go with Quiet by Susan Cain, because I think of one thing. Is that, Brendan, have you read the book?
No.
Okay. So if I think of one thing that changed how I approach my work and conversations is understanding introverts and extroverts. And it's changed my communication with my husband, who's an introvert, and I'm an extrovert, because extroverts are fine answering questions on the spot.
Yeah.
But I learned that giving people questions ahead of time or preparing people and learning how to speak to and call on people to get a response from them, the world is better when we have introverts also speak. And so if you have a client relationship where one person predominantly speaks and, well, all of our goals are the same, so I'm going to share all of them, right? So that type of process, or even in my own marriage, I railroad a lot of conversations because I'm the extrovert and I'm coming up with the answer first. Being able to say to my husband, hey, it's Wednesday. This weekend, I'd love to talk to you about X, Y, and Z, just to prepare you for we're going to have this conversation. I think it's changed my approach to different conversations I've had, and it's changed my approach to how do I talk to clients and prepare them for the conversations that we're going to have and get the best responses out of them.
Yeah, it's like when people ask, well, should I send something beforehand or do I not send something beforehand? Because that's a question that comes up. I've sort of landed on this, which is I'm never going to say you should always do something. It's hard to make the case that you shouldn't send it beforehand, because the people who need time to think through it and prepare are going to appreciate it, and they're going to spend the time to become more prepared. You're going to get better responses. Let's call it the extroverts, on the other hand, the ones that don't need that. They probably won't spend time on it, but that's okay. It didn't harm anybody. Whether you sent it or not, they're going to come and answer the questions on the spot, but everybody comes in and comes into the conversation in the way that they're best prepared to have that conversation, right? Like there's no harm in sending it out beforehand, especially if it's going to help somebody prepare better.
And there's always second level questions, right? There's follow-up questions. Those are going to put people on the spot a little bit. So if you can prepare them at least to start the conversation, I'm going to be a good conversationalist, I'm going to, follow up with curiosity and ask you some additional questions here. There's already going to be that element. So if I can make them feel a little bit more settled and prepared for at least that first step, then that helps.
Well, having time giving someone time to think through and prepare a little bit is going to make the follow-up questions easier to answer because they've already spent some time like processing and thinking through it, right? And then also, once you get somebody going in a even an introvert, once you get them going in a conversation, the follow-up questions also become easier. It's like you're sort of like you sort of trigger them into this, like, okay, now I'm processing mode. Mm-hmm. So anyway, okay, all right, great recommendation. I pulled it up over here on Amazon. You get to put and hang a poster in the office of everybody that's listening around the world. What would it say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's about how you want to approach conversation. So for me, some of my mantras that I come into conversations with are, be helpful, be kind, and bring joy. And so if those are my goals in the meeting are to be helpful, be kind, and bring joy, that would be the reminder that I'd like every advisor to have going into a meeting.
Be helpful, be kind, bring joy. I like it. All right, last question. We started this in the last episode. We're continuing it, but we're having the last guest pass on a question to the next guest, which I'm excited to hear what yours is going to be because you have a question spreadsheet and you love questions. You're thinking through how to ask questions. Wow. So the last guest, Rick Forrester, we talked about a lot of things, but one of the things was how he had enough. At one point, he got more money than he ever thought he could need. He retired early and it was unfulfilling. And so we went through his journey to come back to finding purpose and all that. He says his question he didn't know who it was, but his question is, assuming you have zero chance of money or recognition, so money and recognition is irrelevant. What's one project or activity that you would try that you have yet to try or do?
Yeah, I think that one thing I would love to bring to life is helping advisors feel confident moving through these processes. So how do you pull all the technology together and help clients with that workflow process and with boring? But I just think of all of these potential advisors that are out there that could be supported and lifted up into a set of processes to turn them into, I think any advisor can turn into a fantastic advisor and conversationalist if they have the right kind of framework. So I think I would want to build that out for advisors.
What would that look like? In other words, would you build it out for them to use, or would you teach them how to build it out to use, if that makes sense?
So, but I think having that, I think if it's taken me so many years to get to this point with my workflow steps and delegation process and how to attack each meeting. I'm constantly tweaking and fine tuning that. But I think being able to give somebody, hey, if you're going to do this work, here are a set of meetings with a set of questions, with a set of assessments, with a set of workflow steps to move through that so that you're not bogged down trying to figure out what to do, but you can kind of put those pieces together and have the framework for a very good client relationship and conversation. So it takes the guesswork out of maybe creating that. And you can make it their own.
And you're probably going to have better meetings and conversations because you're not expending your brain capacity on all the little minute tasks and things that need to go into it, right? You're able to just be more present and enjoy the meeting and the conversation. Or at least, I guess you should tell me. But that's what I would imagine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. There you have it. I guess we owe Samantha Russell somewhat of a thank you for being on stage and talking about being bold and reaching out. Glad that you did it. It's been a much anticipated conversation. Thank you for being here. For anybody who wants to know more, who goes, hey, I need to join this Emily Rassam fan club. She's amazing at what she does. Where can they go? What should they do?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is really where I share a lot of my thoughts, ideas, and I love to interact with friends on there, other advisors. So find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. We will link to that. Yeah. And thanks to Samantha Russell, but more importantly, Emily, thanks for being here. Thanks for the awesome work that you're doing. Truly appreciate it and enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of the guest. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. The commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by the guest or RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change anytime without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. The guest and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.